Shalom. This is your brother Taza Yah Amar of GMS Valdosta, Georgia, coming out with another weekly lesson. And I pray that it be edifying. But first, we want to give all praises and glorifications to Yahweh, by Hashem, Yahweh Shai, by Hashem, Rekakadash. Double honors to our apostles and elders of GMS, Great Millstone, for teaching us the true knowledge of these scriptures. I want to say Shalom and Ahar to all the Arkwans and Arkwans that are striving and thriving in the same 100% true doctrine. Today's lesson is based upon a tragic situation that happened right here in Valdosta, Georgia. It was heartbreaking. And it was about a 2-year-old that was at this daycare center, and the caretaker went to sleep, left the young man, 2-year-old, young baby, left him unattended, and being a little Jake, he inquisitive, he's robust, full of energy, because he's a Jake. He's God-chosen people. So he extraordinary for a 2-year-old. They can do some of the amazing things even at the age of 2-year-old, simply because he's a Jake. And what he did, he probably opened up some doors that was probably designed for your average 2-year-old not to be able to compromise, but he did. And ventured into a kennel with 2 Rottweilers. Imagine that. And he was mauled to death. Little fella. It's heartbreaking. Well, anyway, this goes to show you that when you drop your kids off into different places without researching, just being fully aware where you leaving in what condition you leaving your kids in, and that can even go for family members. There's countless cases of kids being left in the hands of family members and get abused physically and sexually. So you have to be wary and conscientious in whose hands you putting your kids in. Even that defect, your kids ain't safe with defect. They drop them off anywhere to pedophiles, unbeknown to them, supposedly unbeknown to them. But even with defects, your kids ain't safe with defects. Government agencies, sometimes they better off in the condition that they're in than to be put in defect. God knows what goes on in those places. And with that, I'm gonna play this video
kept me going. That was the reason I got up. That's what I did it for. I got up every single day for him.
Behind me is the home where law enforcement arrived to find 2-year-old Kamir Jones deceased. He was under the supervision of 48-year-old Stacy Wheeler Cobb, an unlicensed home daycare owner. She admitted to law enforcement that she had been napping and hadn't checked on the child for over 2 hours. Kamir's mother, Adriana Jones, says she was just trying to provide a better life for her son when she dropped him off with Cobb Saturday.
I texted on my 15-minute break. I said, hey, how is he? How did he do? I'll be off at 7. She didn't respond. I text on the way at 7:06. I text on the way at 7:06. It didn't go through. I was like 5 minutes down the road. I'm like, what she got going on? Like, why she didn't respond to my text? She usually responds. Like, I didn't know she usually responded. I said, that's weird. That's very weird.
Adriana told me that in-home daycare came highly recommended and that Cobb had even advertised her services in local Facebook groups. One post reading, I have a small home daycare and I have a new opening. I have numerous excellent references that I can provide immediately upon request. Adriana says it was those references that prompted her to reach out to Cobb.
That was not the same lady I met the first day. That last day, the devil had her. That was not the same lady.
Saturday, Adriana says she hadn't heard from the sitter for several hours after dropping Kamir off, and trusting her instincts, she left work early, only to find a devastating scene crowded with law enforcement.
He told me, my baby was gone and he got him. I'm thinking they took him to the hospital. I said, is he alright? Is he alright? He shook his head. He shook his head and looked me in my eyes. He said, sorry, Adriana. He's not alright. I cried so hard. I cried so hard. I cried so hard.
Now that Kamir is gone, the family says they hope justice will be served because this could have been avoided.
I don't want her to sleep. I want this to eat her up. I want blue hearts all around the world. I want Kamir Jones' name everywhere. I want them to donate to my child. Send flowers. I'll make a PO box. You send whatever. I just need the support.
Cobb remains in police custody, but also police tell me that additional charges are expected as the investigation continues.
Oh boy, heartbreaking. But like I said, you got to be careful where you leave your kids at. Everything and everybody ain't to be trusted. And with that being said, my first scripture going to be the book of Lamentation, chapter 4, starting at verse 3. Even the sea monsters draw out breath. They give suck to their young ones. The daughter of my people is become cruel, like the ostriches in the wilderness. This basically is saying that the daughter of Israel have become complacent with their babies, the young ones. It's this society has convinced you that it's okay to just drop your kid off at a daycare center or nursery just because someone says, okay, it's a replica place, it's okay. It's so basically it's your kids will be in good hands. Not so. Here it is. This lady was asleep for 2 hours. A 2-year-old unsupervised for 2 hours. Make that make sense. And as I mentioned earlier, Jake, little Jake, 2-year-old, he robust, he full of energy, he is inquisitive, he exploring things, he's in his own little mind. He thought the dogs were probably, friendly, he could cuddle and play with them, unbeknownst to him that they were bloodthirsty, and that they probably had been pinned up, and who's to say? They might have been trained to kill Jakes. Who knows? Can't put nothing past these devils. And with that being said, my next scripture is going to be the book of Job, chapter 39, and starting at verse 13. So the book of Job, chapter 39, starting at verse 13. Gavest thou the goodly wings unto the peacocks, or wings and feathers unto the ostrich, which leaveth her eggs in the earth, and warmeth them in the dust. Which leaveth her eggs in the earth, and warmeth them in the dust. The ostrich have a built-in instinct of just laying their eggs in the dirt, barely covering them up, and just leave them. Unlike most birds that would sit on their eggs, until they hatch, or they might take a break here and there, but the majority of their times are spent on their eggs for the warmth of their body, will increase the hatching. But not the ostrich. They just lay his eggs in the sand, and forget about them. Job chapter 39, verse 15. I'm start at Job chapter 39, start at verse 14 again. Which leaveth her eggs in the earth, and warmeth them in the dust. In other words, she just lay the eggs in the dirt, let the sun and the dirt do the hatching process. That's what she's supposed to be doing. And forgettest that the foot may crush them, or that the wild beast may break them. And I'm going to read that again. And forgetteth that the foot may crush them, or that the wild beast may break them. And that's what happened to that little boy. The wild beast. Two ferocious Rottweiler. And those dogs, they are bred to be ferocious. They're not bred to be humble and docile, to be a lap dog or something you can cuddle up with. Those dogs are bred just for what they do. Destruction. Job chapter 39 verse 16. She is hardened against her young ones. You know, this generation, they're hardened against their kids. You know, they let them stay out and stay up all times of the night. You know, they are given everything that they want on a whim. All they got to do is throw a tantrum and they get what they want. They tell the parents what to do instead of the other way around. They rule the parents don't rule them. They set up the rules and guidelines. She is hardened against her young ones as though they were not hers. Her labor is in vain without fear. You know, this lady was, she said she checked, she always called and, make sure everything all right. But you know what? If your mind wasn't at ease when you was at work and you had the intuition to keep calling and checking, hey, it was trying to tell you something then. The spirit was moving with you then. That something wasn't right. Anytime you're not at peace with a situation, you're constantly on panic mode. That's the spirit trying to tell you something. You better listen. And with that being said, I'm going to read this again. Job chapter 39 verse 16. She is hardened against her young one. Sometimes we have the tendency to just cast those feelings aside. And eventually you just harden yourself to the things that that's trying to get your attention. You just shrug it off. Oh well, nothing to worry about. Okay. This was this lady attitude. And you see what happened. She is hardened against her young ones as though they were not hers. Her labor is in vain without fear. Her labor is in vain without fear. This lady was, like she said, she was trying to make a better life for her and her kid, but nothing wrong with that. But sometimes you have to have your priorities in order. What's most important? Your child's safety and well-being, or slaving on a tedious job that's probably ain't going nowhere, that the opportunities of that job taking you to a situation that are going to get you out of, that's going to put you on a higher status. No, you was pretty much in that hamster wheel, going nowhere fast. And with not having your priorities in order, this what happened. Job chapter 39 verse 18. What time she lifted up herself on high. That's what she was trying to do. She was trying to lift herself on high. But at the same time, like I said, her priorities wasn't in order. Her child's safety was number one. She scorneth the horses. She scorneth the horse and his ride. She scorneth correction and authority. As I mentioned earlier, she had to end the wishing because she was constantly calling, checking. If your mindset was to constantly call and check on your kid, that means you wasn't at ease. And that should have been that was a red flag right there. And with that being said, my next scripture is going to be the book of Esdras in the Apocrypha, 2nd Esdras, chapter 5 and verse 8. There shall be a confusion also in many places, and the fire shall be often sent out again, and the wild beasts shall change their places, and menstruous women shall bring forth monsters. That's as being prophets. You just have to tell the situation just the way it is. And with that being said, I'm going to read this scripture again and then go from there. There shall be a confusion also in many places, and the fire shall be oft sent out against, and the wild beasts shall change their places, and menstruous women shall bring forth monsters. In these words that I just spoken out of the 2nd Esdras chapter 5 verse 8, it's saying that the Most High is sending out judgment. The little one might have been called for judgment. What did he do in his prior life?